Okay, so this is going to be a review of the first episode of The Last of Us Season 2. As always, as I always say, I'm aiming for this video to not be too long. I actually don't have much time to film this and edit this, but, you know, we're aiming for this to be under about 15 minutes, let's say. If you don't know my history with The Last of Us, I will say it is deeply impactful and deeply important to me. The first one, when I was a kid, was my favorite game. Instantly, it kind of changed my perspective on what video games could be, but also what art in general sort of is. What you're trying to achieve with a piece of entertainment. Are you just meaning for it to be entertaining? Are you trying to, send a message? Is it trying to be deeply impactful on a person? And then the second game, which is where the second season comes from, is deeply impactful. And I actually think, in a lot of ways, I think the second game is probably better. I think it's deeper. I think it expands on a lot of the themes and the message of the first game. I think the gameplay elements are deeper. But we're not here to discuss the game in its entirety. The second game, to me, is, whilst I think that the first game is actually pretty much made to almost to be a show or to be a movie, I think that the second game is a lot harder to adapt because of the structure of that second game and because of the themes and sort of what happens in it that I can't really discuss in this. Once it happens in season 2, you will know it. We will get there and it will be blatantly obvious what has happened, what I'm talking about, what the significant event is. But until then, I don't really want to talk about it because I don't want to spoil it. And so I'm going to attempt to talk about this briefly and talk about some of the issues that I think exist in this first episode and some of the reasons why I'm kind of worried about where this season potentially might go because of how it's different from that second game. So if we start at the beginning of the episode, I actually think that's quite a good place to start for me to talk about one of my issues or one of my concerns. I would probably hesitate to call this an issue yet. I would, much rather call it concern because it hasn't really developed into something yet, and I'm waiting and I'm hesitant to call it an issue because I need to see how this develops over the course of the next few episodes to see whether or not I actually think it's impactful in a negative way on my experience with the show. When we played the game, one of the most infamous moments I would say in video games probably ever happens within the first hour and a half of you playing that game. Now, with this show, it has changed it so that the person who does that act you open with, and that is a slight spoiler, I guess. You can probably see where I'm going, but I feel like it's important enough that me phrasing it that way doesn't necessarily spoil it. You don't really know what's going to happen. I think opening with, let's just say we open with Abby, who is, the quote unquote villain of this season, although I would contest calling her that, and I think as the season will go on, we'll see why. The issue that I have with this, or the concern that I have with this, is that the game, the second game, part 2, does not introduce you to Abby in the manner that it does. It does not say that directly she has an issue with Joel. It does not say that she is going after Joel and that she wants to kill him and kill him slowly at that. It doesn't suggest that she is out for revenge. In fact, you are introduced to her in some sort of like nice way. You're kind of introduced to her as like, oh, this is just a regular woman in an apocalypse who's trying to go out about her life. She's looking for someone. We don't know who that is. We don't know what her goal is when she meets that person. And so changing this narrative structure to where we know what her intent is means that when we reach the defining moment of this season, we aren't going to have that element of surprise and shock that the game has. So I wonder about how does the show, for me as a player of the original games, how is this game going to, let's say, mend that for me? Because the reason that the game is so deeply impactful and important to me is because of how shocking and surprising that original event is. If therefore there isn't that element of surprise, what is it that you have that is going to sort of guide us through this season? And I don't think it's just simply that you can say, oh, this is a good story. I think you have to have something there that sort of replaces that element of surprise. And I'm not really sure what that is. I'm not really sure what that could be, but I'm interested to see what that could be because I don't know where this show is going to go. I personally don't believe that when we hit that moment, that moment is going to be as impactful because you will be expecting it, or at least you're going to be expecting some variety of it. I understand it from an element of we are going to see. I would suspect in the second episode, I would suspect we're going to see something that hints towards Abby's problem more with Joel, and we're going to flesh out her background before she gets to the shocking moment. I think doing it that way will make her a lot more of a personable and understandable character. But I personally believe that it is far more impactful to me personally and to a lot of people who have played this game for you to go, boom, she does it, and then we go back and let's see what actually happened to her to influence this decision to make her believe that this was necessary. I'm concerned about that, but I don't have an issue with it yet. I hope that makes sense. And then I think after that, we then spend a lot of time with Joel, obviously the principal character of the first game and the principal character of the first season of the show. Joel, again, is one of my favourite characters ever. I think you can view him as a hero, you can view him as a villain, you can view him as neither, and whatever way you view him will in some way be both wrong and correct. So I was interested to see what they would do with him in terms of, I suspected that they were going to change the structure of the show from the game, and because they're changing the structure, that then means that there is going to be time to fill for him, or more screen time, let's say, for him. The introduction of Joel going to therapy in this first episode is so interesting to me, because in that first season and in that first game, he is a person who is deeply, deeply traumatized, suffering with PTSD, you could even argue, and responds to that by shutting himself off from the world and from everyone else, and uses violence continuously to get himself through those difficult moments and to take out his anger, his sadness, his depression, all those things. So the introduction of therapy, to me, suggests a sort of building of this character away from that first game and away from that first season of the show that I don't think is there in the second game, and I don't think is there in the first game, obviously. And that, to me, is what sort of multimedia entertainment should be, is that if we are adapting something into something else where there is more time to explore these characters, then we should be adding levels to those characters. We shouldn't be just simply making one-to-one recreations, or at least not of everything. There are some where I think it's actually valuable to just do a one-to-one recreation. Say the Uncharted movie, for example. So I think that is a worthwhile inclusion. I think it is something that is going to pay off. I think it's something that will probably build over the next couple of episodes, and we'll probably see the importance of these scenes as Joel comes to sort of a reckoning with what it is that he did, and he will either, maybe regret it or will understand it. I obviously already know the game, so I feel like I can pretty much predict where this is going. So that is one new character dynamic in this season that I believe is worthwhile and I believe is a good inclusion. On the other hand, this sort of exploration of new character dynamics also includes a scene of Joel talking with Maria, who's the head of the community in Jackson, Wyoming. And now, in the game, she's a fairly non-consequential character. She's in maybe 2 scenes overall, and across the 2 games, I would say at most she's in 3 or 4. So she's basically a nothing character in the game. She's a bit more important in the first season of the show, although again, not too much. In the scene where she's talking with Joel, they are discussing whether or not they can continue to take in more refugees from the outside world. And they're going back and forth about this, and Joel is saying, I can't do it, I can't build quick enough, I can't build homes for these people, especially not in the winter. And Maria is disagreeing. She's saying we have to find homes for these people. We can't just simply turn them away. And I'm thinking, all right, this is fine. This is a good sort of parable that, isn't too on the nose. I understand it. And that was it. I thought it was just end there. And then the scene actually ends with Maria turning around to Joel and saying, hey, you were a refugee too once. So don't you forget that, boy. And it's like, all right, that's very fucking strange. I didn't know I was watching a fucking Netflix movie, like a Netflix original movie here. I'm going to the door now, and I am going to open the door, and I am going to find her right now. I find this dialogue, and I'll come on to this a bit more in my next concern, my final concern with this episode. The dialogue in this scene is very strange to me because these are talented writers. We've seen this in the games, we've seen this in the first season of the show, and we've seen this actually with Craig Mazin, we've seen this in Chernobyl. It's very strange to me to be this on the nose because these are talented writers, clearly, and I just don't get why the writing has become so on the nose immediately. And so with me saying that, let's bring in actually the final concern, and then we'll end on that. The final concern I have is in the middle section of the show, of the episode, I would say about 20-25 minutes of it is entirely consumed with the new dynamic of Dina and Ellie. This is something that is going to be ever present in this season of the show, and I would presume in the second season, or the third season of the show. So I'm a bit concerned that the dialogue between these two characters is heavily sort of Gen Z and Gen Z humor. I don't really understand it because to me, and this is going to be a very unique sort of complaint, and it'll make me come across as, a pessimist and quite a depressing person. But in the context of this world, I think it makes complete sense. My issue is these characters, even at the start of the first game, or at the start of the second game, sorry, before anything traumatic has actually happened to them, they're not happy. They are depressed. There are moments of happiness and joy in their lives, but they are not happy people. And in their section, in the section dedicated to Dina and Ellie in their first episode, they're laughing and making jokes as they're hunting down infected. And I just don't understand it because there seems to be some sort of dedication, like, oh, Gen Z humor, like, oh, they're so random, they're quirky and making weird jokes, like they've been watching TikTok for 2 years, and it really confused me, and I will be honest, I genuinely think that about 10 or 15 minutes of this 20-25 minute section is genuinely cringeworthy, and it significantly drew the episode down for me. The first two issues that I came up with, I was sort of like, all right, okay, I've got a concern about the structure. The refugee thing was just very on the nose, but it's just one line, I can overlook that. And then this, I was like, this is like 15 minutes, like this is just going on and on and on. My logic for why I think they needed to include this, or why they felt they needed to include this, is that in the game, Dina and Ellie sort of just get together, and it's very abrupt in a sense. In the context of a post-apocalyptic game, you're sort of just willing to go, yeah, I can't imagine there's many people around for these teenagers to fall in love with. So it kind of makes sense. For some reason in the TV show, they feel the need to sort of contextualize it and add in some sort of background between these two characters to say, oh, well, they were best friends and now they're just becoming more and more on top of that. And I understand why they feel the need to do this within the context of the show. Obviously, as I said earlier, they have time to spend sort of building out these characters. I understand it. I just don't like it. If a lot of the next 8 or 9 episodes, I think it is, of this show or of this season is spent to that humor, I'm not going to enjoy this. And I don't think this will work out very well. I'm of an opinion that I actually think because I think the shocking event is going to happen at the end of the next episode, I think that their belief is they needed to add in some of this humor to sort of create a sort of sense of levity so that when you get to that moment, it isn't just sort of like, God, this is depressing. I think without that in their mind, 9 or 10 episodes altogether will be incredibly hard to watch. because of how depressing it would be. But in my opinion, that is the world, and there is a sincere nature, and it treats you as an adult, a mature adult, to say, this is the world we've created. This isn't a nice world. These people are not happy. They struggle to get by on a day-to-day basis. There is a sincere and mature nature to that. And to me, unfortunately, I felt as if this first episode takes away a bit of that sincerity. And dare I say it, that some of this humour comes off to me as being a bit, Marvel inspired. That is my review of this first episode. I think it's a rough start for me. I think that this final, my issue with these new character dynamics, I'm hoping it is just a momentary thing. I'm hoping we get more into the tone of the game in the second episode, although obviously because of how this first episode has gone, I am a bit skeptical. But we'll see. I also will say I'm not going to do an episode-to-episode review of this. I think it's just too much of a commitment for me. I don't want to be caught in doing a review of this every Monday and then reviewing a movie every Friday. When the final episode airs, I will look back and I will cover every episode between 2 and the finale. We'll cover it and then I'll do some sort of review about how do I think the season was overall. But yeah, overall, rough start. I'm hoping it gets better. I'm hoping we get more into the tone of the game. But there's still some good stuff in here. I think it's just sort of bogged down by some of these elements that I've talked about. If you made it this far, like, comment, subscribe, all that jazz. Socials in the description. Thank you.